Lesson 7. A Mother's Struggle. Let's get going. Freedom is something all living beings thirst for. Look at the following situations. What is the freedom that each of the following would want to have? A. A tree trapped in tree guard which it has outgrown. B. A parrot in a cage being used for telling the future of passers-by. Read to understand. Harriet Beecher Stowe, a teacher in 19th century America, wrote a remarkable anti-slavery novel called Uncle Tom's Cabin. In this novel, Eliza works for Mrs. Shelby, whose husband is a plantation owner. Mr. Shelby, the plantation owner, finds himself deeply in debt to a slave trader named Haley and decides to sell Eliza's child, Harry, to him. Freedom is such a valuable thing that the mother, ready to go any lengths to preserve it for her child, tries to escape with him the night before he is to be taken from her. Read on to find out how successful she is. It is impossible to think of a human creature more wholly unhappy than Eliza. When she turned her footsteps from Uncle Tom's cabin, her husband's suffering and danger, and the danger of her child, all blended in her mind. With the rest she was running in, leaving the only home she had ever known, and cutting loose from the protection of a friend whom she loved and respected. Then there was the parting from every familiar object. The place where she had grown up, the trees under which she had played, the groves where she had walked many an evening in happier days by the side of her young husband. But stronger than all was maternal love, which had been turned into frenzy by the approach of a fearful danger. Her boy was old enough to have walked by her side, but now the bare thought of putting him out of her arms made her shudder, and she strained him to her breast with a powerful grasp as she went rapidly forward. The frosty ground cracked beneath her feet, and she trembled at the sound. Every quaking leaf and fluttering shadow sent the blood backward to her heart and quickened her footsteps. She wondered within herself at the strength that seemed to have come to her. She felt the weight of her boy as if it had been a feather, while from her pale lips burst forth a prayer to a friend above. Lord, help! Lord, save me! At first, the novelty and alarm kept the child awake. His mother assured him that if he were only still, she would certainly save him. He clung quietly round her neck, only asking, as she found himself sinking to sleep, "Mother, I don't need to wake up, do I?" "No, my darling, sleep if you want to. But, mother, if I do sleep, you won't let him get me." "No, my God help me," said his mother, with a paler cheek and a brighter light in her dark eyes. "You are sure, aren't you, mother?" "Yes, sure," said the mother, in a voice that startled herself, for it seemed to her to come from a spirit within that was no part of her. The boy dropped his little weary head on her shoulder, and was soon asleep. It seemed to her as if strength poured into her electric stream from every gentle touch and movement of the sleeping, confiding child. The boundaries of the farm, the grove, the woods passed by her dizzily as she walked on, and still she went, leaving one familiar object after another, not slowing till reddening daylight found her many a long mile from all traces of any familiar objects upon the open highway. Eliza had often been with her mistress to visit some connections in the little village of T, not far from the Ohio River, and knew the road well. To go there, to escape across the Ohio River, was the first hurried ugliness of her plan of escape. Beyond that, She could only hope in God. When horses and vehicles began to move along the highway, she became aware that her quick pace and distracted air might attract suspicion. She therefore put the boy on the ground and adjusting her dress and bonnet. She walked on at as rapid a pace as she thought consistent with the preservation of appearances. In her little bundle she had provided a store of cakes and apples, which she used as ways of quickening the speed of the child, rolling the apples some yards before them, when the boy would run with all his might after it. And this trick, often repeated, carried them over many a half mile. After a while they came to a thick patch of woodland, through which murmured a clear brook. As the child complained of hunger and thirst, she climbed over the fence with him, and sitting down behind a large rock which concealed them from the road, she gave him a breakfast out of her little package. The boy wondered and grieved that she could not eat. When putting his arm round her neck, he tried to push some of his cake into her mouth. It seemed to her that the rising in her throat would choke her. "No, no, Harry darling, mother can't eat till you are safe. We must go till we come to the river." And she hurried again onto the road. Eliza stopped at noon at a neat farmhouse to rest and buy some dinner for her child and herself. An hour before sunset she entered the village of T, by the Ohio River, weary and footsore, but still strong in heart. Her first glance was at the river, which lay between her and liberty on the other side. It was now early spring, and the river was solemn and turbulent. Great cakes of floating ice were sinking heavily to and from the tripped waters. Eliza stood for a moment, thinking about this unfavorable aspect of things, which would prevent the usual ferry boat from running, and then turned into a small public house on the bank to make a few inquiries. The hostess, who was busy in getting the evening meal ready, stopped with a fork in her hand, as Eliza's sweet and sorrowful voice arrested her. "What is it?" she said. "Isn't there any ferry or boat that takes people over to B?" "No," she said. "No, indeed," said the woman. "The boats have stopped running." Eliza's look of dismay and disappointment struck the woman, and she said inquiringly, "Anybody sick? You seem very anxious." "I've got a child that's very ill," said Eliza. "I never heard of it till last night, and I've walked quite a bit today, in the hope of getting to the ferry." "Well, now that's unluckily," said the woman, whose motherly sympathies were much aroused. "I'm really concerned for you." "Well, take him into this room," said the woman, opening a small bedroom where stood a comfortable bed. Eliza laid the weary boy upon it, and held his hands in hers till he was fast asleep. For her there was no rest, as a fire in her bones. The thought of the butcher urged her on, and she gazed with longing eyes on the sullen waters that lay between her and liberty. About 3/4 of an hour after Eliza had led her child to sleep in the village public house, the pursuers came riding into the same place. Eliza was standing by the window, looking out in another direction, when Sam's quick eye caught a glimpse of her. Hallie and Andy were 2 yards behind. 1,000 of lives seemed to be concentrated in that one moment for Eliza. Her room opened by a side door to the river. She caught her child and sprang down the steps towards it. The trader caught a full glimpse of her just as she was disappearing down the bank, and throwing himself from his horse and calling loudly on Sam and Andy. He was after her like a hound after a deer. In that dizzy moment her feet seemed to her scarcely touch the ground, and a moment brought her to the water's edge. Right on behind they came, and now with strength such as God gives only to the desperate. With one wild cry and flying leap she vaulted over the turbid currently by the shore, on the raft of ice beyond. It was desperate leap in madness. The huge green fragment of ice on which she alighted cracked and creaked as her weight came on it, but she stayed there not a moment. With wild cries and desperate energy she leaped to another and still another cave, stumbling, leaping, slipping, springing upwards again. Her shoes were gone, her stocking cut from her feet, while blood marked every step, but she saw nothing, felt nothing, till dimly, as in a dream, she saw the Ohio side.